What if Anakin didn't believe his vision of Padmé's death? How would that have changed things? We pick up with Anakin sitting on the veranda of Padmé's apartment after having the vision. Let's begin. Anakin leaned back against the ornate seating carved into the veranda's edge, his eyes fixed on the endless streams of speeder traffic cutting through Coruscant's battle-scarred skyline. Padmé descends the stairs and joins him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her voice carries concern as she asks, "What's bothering you?" "Nothing." Anakin's response is distant, his attention still drawn to the city lights. His fingers trace along the Japor snippet hanging around her neck, the one he'd carved for her all those years ago. "I remember when I gave this to you." Padmé's voice grows firmer, though still gentle. "Anakin, how long is it going to take for us to be honest with each other?" He remains quiet for a moment, then turns to face her, his expression troubled. "I had a vision, a dream," he said. "What did you see?" She moves closer, her hand finding his. Anakin's voice grows strained as he recalls the details. "You were screaming, in pain. I could hear a baby crying, a newborn. You were calling out my name. It felt so real." "Was there anything else?" Her eyes search his face in the dim light. He shakes his head slowly. "No, just the pain in your voice." A gentle smile crosses Padmé's lips. "Anakin, I hate to break this to you, but giving birth isn't exactly known for being painless. Ask any mother in the galaxy." Anakin studies her face for a long moment before nodding slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Come on," she says softly, taking his hand and helping him up. "We should get some sleep." Padmé and Anakin make their way back inside, his mind lighter than before. When morning comes, they barely have time to speak, Padmé rushing off to an early Senate session, while Anakin, already running late, hurries toward the temple. Anakin rushed through the temple corridors, knowing he's late for the briefing. He finds Obi-Wan in one of the meeting halls as the report on the Outer Rim sieges draws to a close. His former master merely smiles at his tardiness. "You haven't missed much," Obi-Wan says warmly. "The campaign is going better than expected. General Grievous is on the run." "That's good news," Anakin replies, and he means it. Without the dark cloud of prophetic doom hanging over him, his mind is clearer, more focused on the present. "Oh, and the Chancellor has requested to meet with you," Obi-Wan adds. He seemed quite insistent. Later, in Palpatine's office, the Chancellor's usual warmth seems somehow different as he speaks at length about the Jedi's supposed failures. He talks of their rigid ways, their unwillingness to embrace necessary change. "My boy," Palpatine finally announced, "I am appointing you to be my personal representative on the Jedi Council." Where once this might have sparked excitement at the prospect of accessing restricted knowledge from the Jedi archives as a master, now Anakin only feels discomfort. The thought of being thrust into political maneuvering, of being caught between the Council and the Chancellor, feels suffocating. "Chancellor," he begins carefully, "I'm not sure the Council will accept this appointment." He shifts uncomfortably, wondering how to express his reservations without causing offense. "The Council needs you. They will accept this appointment," Palpatine said, his tone fatherly yet somehow different that day. Anakin stood before them as Master Windu delivered the verdict, a seat on the Council, but not the rank of Master. In another timeline, where desperate visions of Padmé's death haunted his every moment, this denial would have been devastating. The rank of Master wasn't about pride or recognition then. It was his only hope of accessing the restricted archives, of finding some way to save her. That Anakin would have burned with barely contained rage. But this Anakin simply bowed and took his seat. After the session, Obi-Wan pulled him aside in one of the temple's quiet corridors. "The Council wants you to report on all of the Chancellor's dealings," Obi-Wan said carefully. "They want to know what he's up to." Anakin felt his heart sink. Spying on the Supreme Chancellor, it was treason by any other name. More politics, more deception, dragging him deeper into a world he wanted no part of. Where once he might have seen this as yet another obstacle keeping him from saving Padmé, now it was simply an unwanted burden pulling him away from where he knew he should be. Out there, fighting alongside his troops. "They're asking me to spy on a friend," he said, his voice carrying disappointment rather than anger. But he agreed nonetheless, though the weight of it sat heavy on his shoulders, not with the burning resentment of betrayal, but with the tired acceptance of a soldier being asked to fight on yet another unwanted front. That evening, in the opulent galaxy's opera house, Anakin sat beside Palpatine as ethereal lights danced across the dome above them. The Chancellor dismissed his aides and began speaking of clone intelligence, discovering Grievous on Utapau. Their conversation gradually shifted as Palpatine spoke of his concerns about the Jedi Order, their secretive nature, their reluctance to share power. "Anakin, have they asked you to spy on me?" Palpatine asked directly. I "Don't know what to say," Anakin replied, his discomfort confirming the Chancellor's suspicions. Palpatine nodded as if unsurprised, speaking of how those who gain power are always afraid to lose it, drawing parallels between the Sith and Jedi, comparing their quests for greater power. The conversation then took an unexpected turn as Palpatine shared the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord so powerful he could influence the midichlorians to create life, to prevent death itself. When Palpatine spoke of this power to save people from death, Anakin's thoughts went not to prophetic visions or future fears, but to the past, to a grave in the Tatooine sand. After learning such power was impossible to learn from a Jedi, Anakin found himself asking, almost without thinking, if such abilities could resurrect someone who had been dead and buried for 3 years. The old pain of his mother's loss had momentarily resurfaced. Palpatine's expression changed as he recognized Anakin's meaning. Realizing that manipulating Anakin with promises of resurrecting his long-dead mother would be futile, he gave only a vague, sympathetic response and did not pursue that avenue further. After the council meeting where Anakin reported Palpatine's intelligence about Grievous being on Utapau, the council quickly agreed to dispatch Obi-Wan to lead the mission. As Master and former Padawan walked together toward the military landing platform, Anakin felt the weight of being left behind on Coruscant, trapped in political machinations rather than where he truly belonged, fighting alongside his mentor. Wanting to extend these final moments together, Anakin found himself sharing more about his evening with the Chancellor. "Master, there's something else," Anakin said as they moved through the corridors. The Chancellor spoke of similarities between the Sith and Jedi. He shared something unusual, a tale about a Sith Lord named Darth Plagueis. He watched Obi-Wan's face carefully as he continued. According to the Chancellor, this Sith had the power to prevent death itself. Have you ever heard of such a Sith? Obi-Wan halted mid-stride, his expression growing concerned. "No," he said thoughtfully. "In all my studies of Sith history, I've never encountered any mention of a Darth Plagueis." They exchanged a few final words before parting. While Anakin had dismissed Palpatine's tale as knowledge gained from researching the Sith after their involvement in the Naboo invasion years ago, Obi-Wan saw things differently. The moment Anakin was out of sight, Obi-Wan withdrew his comlink and contacted Mace Windu. "Master Windu," Obi-Wan began, "have you ever heard of a Sith Lord called Darth Plagueis? The Chancellor has been sharing tales with Anakin about this Sith who supposedly had power over death itself." Disturbed by this revelation, Windu immediately reached out to Master Yoda. The ancient Jedi Master's response was deeply troubling. In 900 years of existence, through all his extensive studies of both Jedi and Sith history, he had never once heard of this Darth Plagueis. That evening, Anakin sat on one of the plush loungers in Padmé's apartment, datapad in hand, as he monitored updates from Ahsoka's mission on Mandalore. Unlike the haunting vision that had plagued him in another timeline, one of Padmé's anguished face and Obi-Wan's presence as she seemed to slip away, a different future revealed itself to him now. In this vision, he saw Padmé, smiling, resting peacefully on a medical bed. Before he could process what this gentler glimpse of the future might mean, his comlink chirped to life. Master Yoda's voice came through, asking about the tale of Darth Plagueis that Anakin had shared with Obi-Wan. Anakin recounted what the Chancellor had told him about the Sith Lord's power over death. "Tell you, did Palpatine, what became of this Plagueis?" Yoda asked carefully. "Yes, Master," Anakin replied, setting down the datapad. "He said Plagueis was killed by his apprentice in his sleep. Betrayed." There was a thoughtful pause before Yoda spoke again. "Only two there can be," he said gravely, referring to the Sith rule of two. "Always the apprentice must eventually destroy the master." After cautioning Anakin to be careful, Yoda ended the transmission. But the ancient Jedi Master's mind was troubled as he contemplated these revelations. The Chancellor's intimate knowledge of Sith legends, unknown even to the Jedi archives, was deeply concerning. His thoughts turned to Count Dooku's warning to Obi-Wan that a Sith Lord called Darth Sidious controlled the Republic. Words Yoda had dismissed as mere attempts to sow discord among the Jedi. But now, connecting these threads, the Chancellor's mysterious Sith knowledge, the rule of two, Dooku's warning about Sidious, Yoda found himself reconsidering that dismissal. Perhaps the Sith's influence reached closer to the heart of the Republic than any of them had dared imagine. With mounting concerns about Sidious's influence and the Chancellor's unexplained knowledge of Sith lore, Yoda carefully weighed his options. The Jedi had long suspected Darth Sidious of manipulating both sides of the war, and with Obi-Wan pursuing Grievous, the conflict could soon reach its end. The question remained, would this disrupt Sidious's plans? Or was this the Sith's plan for revenge? Yoda's thoughts then turned to Mandalore, where another piece of this puzzle might lie. Maul had taken control of that world. Yoda realized that Maul, a Sith Lord who had emerged when darkness began rising in the galaxy, might hold crucial knowledge of Sidious's identity and plans. While Ahsoka Tano had gone to confront him, Yoda sensed they might be running short on time. Though he had belief in her abilities to defeat Maul, extracting vital information about Sidious would require experience she had not yet gained. His presence would accelerate matters considerably. After delegating command of the Kashyyyk operations to Luminara Unduli, Yoda departed secretly for Mandalore. After coordinating their approach, Master Yoda and Ahsoka Tano entered the Grand Palace of Sundari as battle raged in the streets below, and found Maul seated upon his throne. The former Sith Lord revealed what he did in the original timeline, that Sidious controlled the Republic, that its destruction was imminent, and most troublingly, that Anakin Skywalker was central to these plans. When Yoda pressed for clarification, Maul explained how Sidious had been manipulating Anakin to become his future apprentice, and that he had orchestrated the conflict on Mandalore to bring Anakin there and kill him to deprive Sidious of his prized pupil. Ahsoka immediately protested, defending her former master. But Yoda raised a hand for silence. He offered to hear Maul out, then asked directly about Sidious's identity within the Senate. Maul hesitated, caught between fear of Sidious's retribution and the possibility of survival through cooperation. As Yoda listed potential suspects, he sensed a spike of fear when he mentioned Palpatine, Maul's reaction confirming what he had begun to suspect. Chancellor Palpatine was Darth Sidious. The massive throne room windows suddenly shattered inward from a nearby explosion, shards of glass raining down as the battle outside intensified. Realizing that cooperation with the Jedi now represented his best chance for survival and revenge against his former master, Maul agreed to end the siege. He ordered his forces to stand down, which they did reluctantly. Meanwhile, Yoda contacted the Jedi Council, warning them of Palpatine's true identity and the danger to Anakin, instructing them to keep Skywalker away from the Chancellor's influence. With Maul still reluctant to return to Coruscant and face his former master, Yoda spoke with quiet wisdom of their shared purpose, to stop Sidious before his plans could come to fruition. The Jedi Grand Master explained that, together, combining Maul's first-hand knowledge of his former master with the full might of the Jedi Order, they stood a real chance of ending Sidious's machinations. After a moment of consideration, looking out through the shattered windows, Maul nodded his agreement. Ahsoka remained behind to manage the aftermath of the siege, while Yoda and his unlikely ally departed immediately for Coruscant, racing against time to prevent the complete unraveling of the Republic. As Yoda and Maul made their way to Coruscant through secret hyperspace routes, they maintained strict communication silence. Officially, Maul was still being secured on Mandalore, this misdirection crucial to maintaining the element of surprise. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council moved swiftly into action. At the temple, Mace Windu summoned Anakin and shared what Yoda had discovered. As Windu spoke of Palpatine's true identity, pieces began falling into place in Anakin's mind. The Chancellor's intimate knowledge of the Sith, his increasing demands for power, his careful manipulation of the Senate. When Windu insisted Anakin remain within the temple for his own safety, he agreed. Concern for Padmé's safety soon followed. Anakin called her to the temple as well, and though their relationship was an open secret the Jedi had long tacitly acknowledged, they maintained their years-long practice of careful discretion. Only Jar Jar Binks, in his characteristic way, regularly spoke of them as a couple, never quite grasping the delicate social protocol that everyone else followed of pretending not to notice. Word spread carefully among the council members. By the time Obi-Wan received the news, he had already eliminated Grievous, removing any possibility of turning the cyborg general against his ultimate master. The council had also activated the emergency beacon, calling all Jedi back to Coruscant. The emergency beacon's transmission provided a plausible cover story. With both separatist leaders dead, the Jedi peacekeepers were returning home as the war wound down, leaving command to the Republic soldiers. Palpatine sensed this shift in the Force, but remained confident. Order 66 stood ready, but he knew that executing Order 66 without legal justification would lead the Security Council to remove him with Order 65. He needed the Jedi to make a move that could be construed as treason. Mace concluded that Palpatine would never willingly relinquish power. Their only option was to secure the Senate Security Council, legally remove Palpatine through emergency protocols, and manage the transition. Even Anakin, seeing the full picture, agreed there was no alternative. When Yoda returned with Maul, the Jedi launched their operation. One force moved to secure the Senate district, while another to confront Palpatine directly. Seeing the approaching Jedi legions, Palpatine recognized his moment had come. As he issued Order 66, condemning their actions as treason, the Jedi broadcast their revelation to the galaxy, that Chancellor Palpatine was the Sith Lord who had orchestrated the entire war. The battle for Coruscant erupted as Order 66 was executed. Unlike the original timeline, thousands of Jedi were concentrated on Coruscant, rather than scattered across the galaxy, leading to a very different confrontation. On the streets of Coruscant, unprecedented scenes of combat unfolded. Near the Senate District, Master Ki-Adi-Mundi stood at an intersection, his blue blade a blur as he deflected hundreds of bolts back at the advancing clones, while the Jedi he led cut through their ranks with deadly precision. Clone bodies fell by the dozens, their armor offering little protection against lightsaber blades. In the financial sector, a young knight named Sarah Keto used the Force to freeze an entire volley of blaster fire mid-air, redirecting it into an incoming gunship, while her fellow Jedi advanced. The urban canyons became killing fields. Outside the temple precinct, Master Sindralig and a group of senior Padawans disabled clone tanks with precise force pushes, crushing their weapon systems. Yet for every victory, losses mounted. A Jedi would fall after taking down scores of clones, only for their killers to be cut down moments later by companions. Meanwhile, Mace Windu led Anakin and a strike team to secure the Security Council. Under pressure, they executed Order 65, legally removing Palpatine from power. However, Order 66 had already been issued by Palpatine, and as only the Supreme Chancellor had the authority to revoke it, the clones were forced to continue their attack on the Jedi, even as Order 65 turned them against Palpatine. When Yoda's team breached Palpatine's office, they found it empty. As Maul had warned, Sidious had anticipated this possibility and fled. Even the Order 66 command had been transmitted from an unknown location off-world, as they would later find. The tide began to turn as Bail Organa was appointed interim chancellor. His first act was to order all clone forces to stand down. The fighting ceased immediately, though the cost had been severe. Hundreds of Jedi and thousands of clones lay dead across Coruscant, with more Jedi falling across the galaxy before the Order could reach them. Investigation of the clone army revealed the truth through Camino and testimony. Inhibitor chips had been provided by a man they knew only as Tyrannus, whom they believed to be a Jedi. This revelation, combined with evidence from Grievous's Magna Guards leading to the capture of the Separatist Council on Mustafar, and testimony from both Maul and the Separatist leaders, exposed Sidious's manipulation of both sides. The war ended as systems learned of their manipulation, but one task remained: finding Sidious himself. The Jedi Order, while wounded, had survived. The Temple stood, the Republic endured, but somewhere in the galaxy, Darth Sidious waited, his grand plan thwarted, but his ultimate fate still uncertain. In the years following Sidious's escape, life moved forward. The twins, Luke and Leia, grew up on Naboo, while their parents maintained their respective duties on Coruscant, Anakin with the Jedi Order, Padmé in the Senate. Their relationship remained an unspoken reality, as it had been during the war. The Clone Army, after galaxy-wide chip removal, remained loyal to the Republic. The Jedi's relationship with them strengthened, knowing they had been unwilling pawns in Sidious's schemes. The Jedi Order evolved significantly through Chancellor Organa, who was formally elected after his interim period following Palpatine's removal. They gained unprecedented authority to eliminate the Sith threat by any means necessary. Their Shadow Division expanded dramatically, developing a network of Force-sensitive intelligence operatives trained to conceal their presence. Ironically, Palpatine's actions had elevated Jedi influence in the Republic to heights not seen in a millennium. After years of searching, intelligence finally located Sidious on Sojourn, Plagueis' former sanctuary. When Sidious attempted to possess a Jedi, after Anakin struck him down, they were ready. Through an ancient ritual, they trapped his consciousness within a holocron, which was sealed deep within the Jedi Temple archives, a prison for the last of the Sith Lords. And so Sidious stayed trapped within the temple. As for Maul, for his service to the Republic and the Jedi Order, his crimes were forgiven, but he had to live in a secured residence on Coruscant, under constant Jedi observation. It was a fate he accepted, finding some satisfaction in having helped bring down his former master. Master Yoda pumped spice smoke into the Senate building's ventilation system,